Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mr. DarXnights. I know many of you use these videos to relax or fall asleep, so before you drift off, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get comfortable and begin. Story 1. The town of Elder Springs hadn't seen much trouble since the late 80s. Just the occasional drunk tank visitor, an unpaid speeding ticket, or teenagers daring each other into the abandoned paper mill on the edge of Route 12. Sheriff Tom Darrow liked it that way. He was 57, nearing retirement, and had learned long ago that quiet didn't mean boring, it meant safe. That changed the day Mary Wilcox walked into his office. Mary was shaking. Her lips trembled, even after 3 cups of the strong station coffee. She clutched a photo of her brother, Danny, a 34-year-old hunter who'd gone out to Pine Ridge Forest 3 days ago and never came back. "We've looked everywhere," she whispered. "Checked the car park, found his truck, found his gear, but no sign of him. No tracks either, like he just vanished into the trees." Tom rubbed the back of his neck. Pine Ridge Forest had a reputation. Not the kind kids tell scary stories about, but one whisper at adult bar tables, in hunter lodges, and around police precincts. A dense stretch of state land that didn't get many visitors, at least not anymore. Too thick, too quiet, too wrong. Danny Wilcox wasn't the first to go missing out there. There were 2 hikers in '98, a couple in '04. And 2 junior officers, rookies, sent to look for a missing backpacker in 2011. They never found them. All that came back was a crackled radio, recording that no tech could clean up. It was just static, and what sounded like whispering underneath. Sheriff Tom always figured it was just forest misdirection. People got lost, panicked, maybe fell into one of the sinkholes or creeks. Nature was unforgiving. But Mary's tears, the way she clutched that picture, it got to him. "I'll go take a look," he said, standing. Mary blinked. "Alone?" He hesitated. The other officers were young, green, and if there was even a chance this was connected to the 2011 case, he didn't want them caught in it. "Just for a first sweep. Won't go too deep. I know those woods." By noon, he had packed his service revolver, a thermos of black coffee, and a voice recorder, something he always used when working solo. It helped him think, kept him company. He drove to the Pine Ridge trailhead where Danny Wilcox's truck still sat gathering pine needles. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. He hit record. Sheriff Tom Darrow. Entering Pine Ridge at 12:34 p.m. mild weather. Visibility good. Searching for Daniel Wilcox. Approximate coordinates last log, northwest path, 2 miles inward. He stepped past the old gate. The forest closed around him like a mouth. Pine Ridge wasn't like other forests. The trees stood too close, their branches low, like they were listening. There were no birds, no wind, just the soft crunch of Tom's boots on the mossy ground. About half a mile in, he found the first strange thing, Danny's thermos. Upright, clean, like someone had placed it there carefully. Found personal item belonging to Wilcox. No signs of distress. He picked it up, still warm. But that couldn't be. Danny had been gone for 3 days. He unscrewed the lid and sniffed. Fresh coffee. Tom frowned and tightened cap. Maybe someone else had been out here recently. Maybe someone was messing around. He moved on. At 1 mile in, the silence thickened. He stopped, suddenly aware how loud his own breathing sounded. He turned off the recorder for a moment, straining his ears, and that's when he heard it. A whisper, faint like wind through branches, but there was no wind. It was coming from his left, off the main trail, somewhere deeper into the brush. "Help," it said, very soft. "Please." Tom froze. Sheriff's Department. He called out, "Identify yourself." No response. He turned the recorder back on. Unconfirmed vocal contact. Sounded like a request for help. Moving cautiously toward sound. He unholstered his sidearm and followed the voice, pushing aside branches and stepping over roots. The forest here looked older, more gnarled. Every tree felt like it was watching, and the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Sheriff?" He stopped dead. The voice had said sheriff. Not just help. Not hey. Not a name. Sheriff Darrell, his name. That voice, he recognized it. It wasn't Danny Wilcox. It was... No, he muttered. Can't be. He pushed further in. At 2 miles, he reached a clearing. It wasn't marked on any map. He'd never seen it before. A perfect circle of dead trees, surrounding what looked like an old fire pit. There were symbols burned into bark, strange, crooked lines, and in the center, something worse. A police badge, his own precinct's emblem, tarnished, dirt-covered. Tom knelt and picked it up. It was cracked down the middle. "Sheriff Darrell?" Came the whisper again, this time from behind him. He spun. Nobody, just trees. And yet, the radio on his shoulder crackled to life. Static. Then, "Darrell." Then, "Help us." Then, "He's coming." He yanked it off and stared. The radio had been off. He hadn't even turned it on. And now it was speaking. Another whisper from the trees. A different voice. Younger. Panicked. "Dispatch." "This is Officer Braley. We can't find the trail. Everything's wrong. We heard someone calling, but..." Static. Tom's blood ran cold. Braley. That was one of the rookies from 2011. He'd been 23. Vanished on his first month. Another voice now. Calmer. Older. "Darrell, you need to go back. Right now. Don't make the same mistake." That voice, it belonged to his old partner, Rick Morgan. Retired in 2002. Died in 2015. Tom stumbled back. "No," he whispered. "No, this is something playing tricks." But as he turned to leave, the forest had changed. The trail was gone. The trees had moved. The clearing behind him wasn't behind him anymore. It was in front of him. The symbols were now glowing faintly. And from every direction, whispering. Hundreds of them. Layered. Familiar. Begging. Warning. Calling. "Don't listen to him." One voice whispered. "Don't follow the path," another said. "It's not a path. It's a trap." Tom turned in circles, unsure which way was out. The forest had never done this before. It was alive now, breathing. And underneath it all, something else began to rise. Not a whisper, a hum, low, deep, like the earth itself was vibrating. His recorder flickered. The battery drained in seconds. His flashlight dimmed. The radio hissed again, and this time a scream. "Male, sharp, cut off." Then, "Sheriff Darrell, you're next." To be continued. Tom stood frozen in the center of that dead clearing, badge in hand, ears filled with voices that shouldn't exist. He closed his eyes for just a moment. He had to focus. Panic would only make him more vulnerable. He knew that from years of search and rescue. Forest could play tricks on the mind. Echoes, sleep deprivation. Even mold spores had been blamed for hallucinations in places like this. But none of that explained a voice on his radio. Rick Morgan had died in a hospital bed from pancreatic cancer. Tom had spoken at his funeral, and yet he just heard him as clearly as if he were standing beside him in uniform, flashlight raised, whispering caution into the wind. Tom turned slowly, trying to orient himself. If the trail had shifted, he'd need to retrace in a circular pattern, looking for familiar markers, rock formations, old blazes on tree trunks. Standard protocol. He stepped outside the clearing. The second his boot left the circle of dead trees, the hum stopped. Total silence returned. He took a deep breath. "I'm not playing this game," he muttered. He pulled out a bright orange trail ribbon from his pack and tied it around the nearest branch. Then another 50 feet ahead, and another, but by the fourth ribbon, he found himself staring at the first one again. Same knot, same slight tear on the plastic strip. He was walking in circles. He looked around, suddenly aware that the forest light had shifted. The overcast daylight had faded into a dim, unnatural twilight. That couldn't be. It had only been an hour since he entered. 2 at most. He checked his watch. 3:07 p.m. Still early, but the forest looked like dusk. That's when the smell hit him. Copper, mold, smoke. He knew that scent. Burned blood. He followed it, slowly, against his better judgment, and reached a small ravine half a mile north. There, nestled among roots and wet soil, was a shredded police jacket, dark blue, torn, stained, the name tag barely hanging on. Braley. He knelt, inspecting the fabric. It was fresh, not decomposed, not buried in years of leaves. "Why now?" he whispered. His radio crackled again. This time, the voice was desperate. "Sheriff, he's behind." Static. They see through the trees. Static. Not alone. Tom rose quickly and swept the area with his light. Nothing. He stepped further down the ravine and noticed a second item tucked beneath a fallen log. A cassette tape. An actual cassette, old school, marked Elder Springs PD, tape 17A. It was from the archive, but that room had been locked up for years. He flipped it over, and on the back, scrawled in red pen, "Play me where the voices are loudest." Tom stared at the handwriting. It was his. The message was written in his own handwriting. He dropped the tape. "Nope. No. This is a trick." But even as he said it, he picked it back up. Something inside him, curiosity or maybe fear, told him that if he wanted to get out of this forest, he had to follow it through. He marked a few more trees with his ribbons and headed east, deeper toward the heart of Pine Ridge. The further he walked, the thicker the air became, not in a metaphorical way. Physically, it felt humid, thick, heavy, like walking through breath. Then came the whispers again. Not around him, in him. He stopped mid-step, and for a horrifying second, the forest spoke using his own thoughts. "You've always wondered what happened to them. Now you'll see." He fell to his knees, clutching his head. The whispering turned to overlapping voices. Names. All names he recognized. Officer Sandon, Braley, McCormick, even Deputy Sheila Turner. Sheila Turner had gone missing in 1991. She wasn't even on duty that night. Disappeared driving home from a birthday party. Everyone assumed a roadside abduction, but her voice was here. Tom looked up. The trees were bleeding. Dark, syrupy trails ran from the bark, pooling into the soil, and in the streaks, reflections, faces, twisted, silent mouths, eyes wide in endless horror, looking out from within the wood. He screamed, then silence returned. He ran. No plan, just instinct. Branches clawed at his jacket. Brambles caught his boots, but he didn't care. He ran until the forest gave way to something strange, something impossible. An asphalt road, clean, untouched, lit by flickering street lamps. He stopped, blinked. How could this be in the middle of a forest? And then he saw the sign. "Welcome to Elder Springs," but not the modern one. The font was old. The sign cracked, paint peeling. This was the Elder Springs of the 1970s. A single police cruiser sat parked on the road shoulder. He approached slowly. It was a model he hadn't seen in decades, a vintage Ford LTD Crown Vic. And inside was a figure, wearing a sheriff's uniform. It looked like him, older, but also rotting. The figure turned. Its face matched his, except the eyes were sunken black. The mouth opened. No sound came out. Tom stumbled back. The cruiser vanished. The road vanished. and the forest returned. He was on his knees again, alone. He clutched the cassette in his fist. Play it where the voices are loudest. With a deep breath, he turned toward the direction where the whispering had been strongest, the place where the trees had bled. He returned there. He sat in the dirt, pulled out the small portable recorder with tape function, a backup tool he used during old interrogations. He inserted the cassette. Click, the tape word, then played static. Then a voice, his voice. This is Sheriff Thomas Darrell, Elder Springs PD, March 7th, 2003. Location, Pine Ridge Perimeter, North Path. Officer Sheila Turner has been missing for 12 years. Today, I receive a call from her home phone, registered as disconnected. The message left behind simply said, "Come find me where the forest hums." Tom paused the tape. He didn't remember ever recording that. Never heard that tape, but it was his voice. He hit play again. "I'm heading in. Alone. I brought only audio gear and basic supplies. This is probably nothing. But if anyone finds this tape..." The voice stopped. Then silence. Then something else. A scream. Horrible. High-pitched. Like 1,000 voices screaming at once. Then, "Tom, we see you." Then the sound of a gunshot. Then the tape ejected itself. He sat in complete silence. Even the wind had stopped now. Then the voice of Braley again from behind him. "You made it further than we did." Tom turned. Standing at the edge of the clearing were 5 figures in police uniforms. Braley, Sandon, Turner, McCormick, and Rick Morgan. All dead, all watching, none blinking. Rick stepped forward. "You shouldn't have come alone." Tom opened his mouth to speak, but his voice failed him. Braley pointed at the trees. He's still listening. Tom looked back. The tree bark had begun to pulse. Like skin, with each throb, faces formed and vanished. Hundreds of them. A forest of the lost. Rick whispered, "We followed voices. We followed calls. We followed memories. That's what it uses. He doesn't need to kill you. He makes you stay. One by one. Forever." Tom tried to move, but the ground held his legs like cement. "We'll buy you time," Rick said. And just like that, the figures charged into the woods, yelling, drawing attention like bait. And Tom felt it. The grip loosened. The forest, distracted. He ran without knowing direction. Ran as the whispers rose in rage, as the hum returned, as the sky above blackened. And then, light, a thin strip, between trees, a road, pavement, real. He burst out of tree lean, fell to his knees, gasping. Behind him, the forest was silent. No sound, no whispers, just trees, normal trees. He sat there until his radio buzzed again. "Sheriff Darrell, this is dispatch. Do you copy?" He fumbled for the mic. I'm here. Sir, are you okay? You've been out of contact for 2 days." Tom looked at his watch. 3:07 p.m. But now it read, May 3rd, 2 days later. He didn't reply. He just stared back at Pine Ridge. And for one last moment, faintly, softly, he heard Rick's voice. "You still have time." Tom didn't go home. He couldn't. He sat in the back of the ambulance, wrapped in a thermal blanket as paramedics looked him over, talking softly to each other like it was a trauma case they'd rather not wake. Maybe they were right. But his mind wasn't broken. It was too clear, too sharp. That was the real horror. The forest had shown him something. Something alive. Something that remembered. The old deputy, Bobby Langston, was the only familiar face at the station when Tom returned. Bobby had a coffee in one hand and a long list of questions in the other. You vanished for 2 full days, Sheriff. What the hell happened out there? Tom didn't answer. Not at first. He looked around the department. His department. Every wall felt like it was listening. He leaned forward, whispered to Bobby. Close the records room. All of it. Burn the tapes. Every last one of them. Bobby raised an eyebrow. What tapes? Tom didn't blink. All of them. That night, Tom sat alone at his kitchen table, a half-drunk cup of coffee growing cold in his hand. The forest still hummed in his ears. He hadn't slept since coming out of Pine Ridge. Couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Rick's voice. You still have time. Time for what? He opened the small lockbox beside him. Inside was a cassette he recovered in the ravine, tape 17A. He had told Bobby he'd destroyed it. Lied. He couldn't destroy it. Not yet. He stared at the tape for what felt like hours. Eventually, he slid it back into the recorder. Press play. More static. Then a woman's voice he hadn't heard before. This is Officer Sheila Turner, Elder Springs PD. If anyone find this, it's too late for me. I've seen them. Faces in the trees. The ones who went missing before me. They're alive. Somehow. Trapped in the bark. They cry when the wind blows. They beg. Static. Then a low male voice distorted. Wrong. They came when I whispered. The rest was silence. Tom hit stop. He placed the recorder in his drawer, shut it, and locked it. He thought about taking a sleeping pill. Decided against it. Not now. Instead, he got dressed. Full uniform. Gun, flashlight, radio. Then he picked up the final item, an old laminated map. He unfolded it on the table. It showed Pine Ridge Forest from before the fire in 1983, back when the old ranger trail still existed. There was a symbol etched into the corner, drawn in red ink, a circle with a dot in the center. He hadn't noticed it before. He looked closer, where the voices began. He didn't remember writing that, but it was his handwriting. Again, by 3 a.m., Tom stood at the tree line. Same boots, same cold wind. Only this time, he wasn't going in to investigate. He was going in to end it. The forest welcomed him. That was the only way to describe it. As soon as his feet crossed the threshold, the world changed. The temperature dropped. The trees leaned inward. The path seemed familiar, even though it wasn't the one he'd marked days earlier. He didn't use the ribbons. He followed the whisper. They were clearer now. Not just voices, but conversations. Half finished. Echoes of lives cut short. Calls for backup. Pleas for help. Confessions. Dispatch. I'm at mile marker 17. I don't see. Wait. There's someone. I should have told her I was sorry before I left. Don't come near it. Don't. God. Help me. It's in my head. Tom kept walking until he found the circle again. The same clearing. But now the dead trees were gone. Replaced by a cabin. Old. Rotting. Covered in moss. A single yellow light flickered in the window. He approached. The door creaked open before he touched it. Inside was a room that shouldn't exist. Shelves of VHS tapes, cassette reels, and audio logs stacked wall to wall. A single police scanner sat on the table, still on, still whispering static. On the far wall, hundreds of photographs had been pinned, edge to edge. Each one was a missing officer, all from Elder Springs, all staring out with empty eyes. Tom walked slowly through the cabin. Each step creaked. He recognized faces, some he'd worked with, some long before his time. Some were still considered active cases. In the corner, a chair faced the wall. A man sat in it. Tom approached quietly. The man had no face, not a mask, just smooth skin, pale, stretched tight over bone. Yet somehow it turned toward him and whispered in Rick's voice, "You were never supposed to leave." Tom didn't speak, didn't move. The faceless figure raised its hand and pointed to the wall of tapes. "You've heard us, but not him." Tom looked. There was one tape, dead center. No label, just a black cassette, slightly larger than the others. The air around it shimmered. He walked over and picked it up. The instant his fingers touched the plastic, his ears rang. Loud, high-pitched. He dropped the tape, but the sound didn't stop. The cabin began to flicker, like a film reel stuttering. Dark light, then silence, then voices. Hundreds, all whispering the same word. Stay. Tom turned and ran, but the door was gone, the window gone. The cabin was now a hallway, stone-cold narrow. The walls whispered. He ran. Down the hall. His boots echoed. Then, ahead, he saw a door, slightly open. He shoved it and stepped out, into the clearing. But this time it wasn't forest. It was a station. Elder Springs PD. Deserted. Files fluttered. Chairs overturned. The building cracked, crumbled, like it had been left to rot for years. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway. Sheriff Rick Morgan. Alive. Ho! Tom approached, unsure. Rick. Rick didn't move. He smiled. It was never a forest. Tom blinked. What? Rick pointed upward. Tom looked. The sky above the station peeled away, like wallpaper. Beneath it, nothing but void. Empty black. It's not the trees, Rick said. It's not the land. It's the memory, the echo, the voices. They built a place to live, and we kept feeding it. Tom stepped back. No, this is real. This happened. This isn't just some hallucination. It's memory, and you made it stronger. Every search, every case, every time you wonder what happened to us, you whispered our names. Tom shook his head. That's not how it works. That's not. Rick smiled sadly. But it is. And then the world blinked, and Tom was back in the forest, kneeling, daylight, real. A ranger stood over him, looking down, puzzled. Sir, are you okay? Tom coughed, nodded slowly. I think I was sleepwalking. The ranger helped him to his feet. You're lucky. This forest gets weird at night. No cell service. No GPS. I've seen people vanish for hours. Tom dusted off his coat. Yeah, tell me about it. He made it out again. Somehow. Weeks passed. He never spoke of it again. He did his job, filed reports, went to funerals. But never entered the forest again, until one night a year later, a rookie officer went missing near Pine Ridge. A call came in garbled static, sounded like him, said something about seeing a house. Tom stared at the radio, paused, then took his badge off, grabbed a flashlight, and left. No one ever saw him again. But 2 days later, an envelope arrived at the station. No return address. Inside was a cassette, unlabeled, and a note for words. You still have time. The tape is still in evidence lockup. No one dares play it. Not anymore. Because sometimes at night, the station scanner turns itself on, and if you listen closely, you'll hear the whisper, not from outside, but from the trees. Story 2. It started with a call that shouldn't have existed. 1:13 a.m. February 4th. A static-filled 911 transmission buzzed to life at the Elder Springs Dispatch Center, cutting to the low hum of night shift boredom. Help! He's coming. He's got the axe again. The voice was a young boy's. Scared. Gasping. Then silence. Marcy, the dispatcher on duty, sat bolt upright and replayed the call. Her screen showed no origin, no cell tower, no GPS ping. Just one line under address. Cabin 11 Mason Forest Route. Marcy froze. Cabin 11 hadn't existed since 1982. That was the year it burned down in one of the worst backwoods killings in Elder Springs history. A family of 4 slaughtered, 1 survivor, a young boy who was never found. The cabin was sealed off, eventually collapsed. Nature took the rest. No utilities, no phone lines, no power, no reason it should be calling 911. Yet the call log showed a timestamp, a connection for seconds long. And it wasn't the first one that week. Officer Kyle Benton, 24, new to the force, was the only one available when the call came through. Just 2 months into the job, Kyle still felt like a visitor in the uniform, trying hard to earn his place. Cabin 11, he repeated, glancing down at the dispatch sheet as Marcy briefed him. Didn't that place burn down? She didn't answer, just nodded. Kyle checked his sidearm, radioed in his route, and got behind the wheel of his cruiser. His shift wasn't supposed to end until 3, and with Elder Springs being the sleepy town it was, the rookie figured it would be nothing, probably just a faulty signal, some shortwave pickup. Still, his fingers trembled slightly as he gripped the wheel. Mason Forest Road wasn't marked on GPS anymore. The town had let the whole area go wild. He drove in silence, the trees getting thicker with every mile, their branches clawing toward the road like skeletal arms. His high beams barely cut the dense fog. At 2:04 a.m., the radio crackled. Unit 2 to 4 status check. Kyle clicked the mic. Still en route. GPS is glitching. About 4 miles in. No sign of the cabin yet. Static, then a whisper. Not from the radio. From behind him. He turned fast, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. But the back seat was empty. He flicked the light across the interior. Nothing. Just his breath fogging up the windows. Then a thump from the trunk. He slammed the brakes. Silence. No movement. Just trees. Fog. The wind stopped. It wasn't just quiet. It was vacuum silence. The kind that made your heartbeat feel like a shout. Another thump. Kyle stepped out of the cruiser slowly, boots crunching on frozen pine needles. He walked around the back and unlocked the trunk. It popped open with a hiss. Empty. Totally. Except for one thing. A burnt black and rotary phone. It wasn't there when he left the station. And yet, there it sat. Slightly melted. Still intact. The receiver was off the hook. Kyle reached for it. The instant his fingers touched the plastic, it rang. Loud. He nearly dropped it. He picked it up instead, cautiously lifting it to his ear. Help us? A boy's voice. Soft. Frantic. Don't let him see you. Click. The line went dead. Kyle stared at the phone in stunned silence. His breath caught in his throat. Something in the trees moved. Snapping twigs. Then nothing. He took a step back. Closed the trunk. Climbed back into the cruiser and locked the doors. The radio hissed again. This time, it wasn't Marcy. It was a recording of the exact same boy's voice he'd just heard on the phone. Help! He's coming! He's got the axe again. The line went dead again, and the GPS pinged. Once, exactly 400 feet ahead. Cabin 11. Kyle parked just short of the clearing. The forest parted just enough to reveal the remains of the structure, or what was left of it. A chimney, half buried in vines. Stone steps, charwood rising like broken teeth. But it wasn't abandoned. Not completely. A lantern flickered inside. A working lantern. Kyle drew his weapon and advanced slowly. Every step felt like he was walking into a memory. The air was thick, pressed down, like something watching, waiting. He reached the front of the cabin, pushed the broken door. It swung open with a groan. Inside, the cabin was whole, not burned, not collapsed, alive. Wooden walls, fireplace roaring, furniture in place, family photos on the mantel. Kyle stepped back, heart racing. He turned around, but the forest behind him was gone, now replaced by a backyard, trees trimmed, toys scattered. A child's red tricycle lay near a clothesline. He turned back inside. A woman stood in the kitchen, smiling, apron on. She didn't seem to notice him. Kyle? Dinner's ready. His blood ran cold. He didn't know this woman, had never seen her, but she said his name, and her voice, it sounded like his mother's, from when he was a boy. He backed away, tripping on the rug, knocking over a lamp. It hit the floor and shattered, and everything changed. The fire went out. The woman turned and screamed. Her face peeled backward, like a candle melting in reverse. Then black, total darkness. Kyle screamed and woke up outside on the forest floor. 5:17 a.m. Dirt in his mouth. Rain starting to fall. The cabin was gone again. A pile of ash and stone. His cruiser sat idling where he left it. Radio static hummed quietly, and next to him, half buried in the mud, was the rotary phone, still ringing. The rotary phone wouldn't stop ringing. Kyle sat there in the mud, soaked from the drizzle, trembling, staring at the old black handset, like it might bite. His fingers hovered just above it. He wanted to smash it, bury it, burn it. But more than that, he wanted answers. He reached down and lifted the receiver. At first, just static, then a sound like wind or breath, then a whisper. Don't leave, we're still here. The voice changed mid-sentence. A chorus of whispers overlapping. Children, women, men, police officers. Then one final voice, loud and clear, like it was right behind his ear. He's watching you. Kyle spun around, flashlight darting across the trees. Nothing, just mist and shadows. His cruiser lights flickered, then went out entirely. He ran toward it, boots slipping on wet pine needles, heart hammering. The radio was dead. No dashboard lights. The engine off. The car was ice cold. Kyle sat inside, shivering, trying the ignition. Click. Nothing. He grabbed the radio mic. Dispatch. This is Unit 2 to 4. I need assistance. My vehicle's down. Static. Then a voice. But not Marcy's. A child's again. Don't come back tomorrow. Officer Benton. He remembers you now. The line cut. Kyle stared at the radio. The fog outside had thickened. The forest looked darker than night. Like light itself couldn't exist in there anymore. He turned the key again. The engine rumbled to life. Barely. The headlights buzzed on, sputtering like they were underwater. He slammed the cruiser in reverse, then spun it around and sped out of the forest like a man possessed. Only one thing felt real. He wasn't alone anymore. Something had followed him out. Back at the station, Kyle didn't speak. Not at first. He told Marcy there was nothing. An old clearing, cabin debris. Maybe kids playing with radio equipment. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press. He took the rest of the shift in the evidence room, quietly cataloging petty crime files, trying to forget the voice, the cabin, the woman who looked like his mother. By dawn, he convinced himself it was a hallucination, stress, a forest trick, sleep deprivation. He even convinced himself that the phone in the trunk had been a sick prank, some weird hazing thing for new recruits. But deep down he knew better, because that night the same 911 call came again. Same timestamp, same voice, same words. Help! He's coming, he's got the axe again. And again, the call showed the address, cabin 11. The third night, he didn't wait for orders. He couldn't. Something inside him pulled him back, like gravity. This time, he brought more than a flashlight. He wore a body cam, packed an extra radio, took his sidearm and 2 spare mags. He left a note on Marcy's desk. If I'm not back by dawn, send someone else. But not alone. And not you. He didn't sign it. Didn't need to. As he entered Mason Forest again, the road looked different, narrower, as if the forest was slowly erasing it. By mile 4, the fog returned, thicker than before. He killed his headlights to avoid attracting attention, but the fog glowed on its own. Pale, sickly, he parked at the same clearing. But this time, the cabin was fully rebuilt before he stepped out of the car. Smoke from the chimney, lights inside, a shadow moving behind the curtain. His radio buzzed. A new voice this time, gravelly, deep, and human. Why did you come back? Kyle froze. He stepped out, weapon drawn. Radio clipped to his shoulder. Then movement to his left. A man, no, a figure, standing between the trees, wearing a sheriff's uniform. Muddy, torn, face pale like wax. Blood smeared across the badge. He recognized a name tag. S. Collins. Kyle had seen it on the wall of fallen officers. Collins disappeared in 1989. Last seen investigating cabin 11. Kyle raised his weapon. Identify yourself. The figure just pointed at the cabin, then faded, not into the trees, into the air, like steam. Kyle swallowed hard. His boots felt rooted to the earth, like the forest was trying to absorb him. But he moved forward anyway, toward the cabin, toward whatever was inside. The porch groaned beneath his steps. He reached the door, raised his hand, knocked once, then twice. Silence. He pushed it open. Inside, warmth, firelight. Again, the cabin looked untouched by time. Same rug, same mantle, same ticking grandfather clock. But this time, no people. Not yet. He stepped in, door closing behind him with a click that sounded like a vault ceiling. His radio crackled. Kyle, he spun. Nobody, just the static whispering his name. Then footsteps above him. Heavy, measured, something walking on the ceiling. He pointed the flashlight up, but the roof was solid wood. No attic, no stairs. Yet the thumbs continued. Then something dropped onto the floor in front of him. A photo, old, black and white, for people. A man, a woman, 2 boys. He turned it over. Cabin 11, July 12, 1982. One of the boys had been circled in red ink. Underneath, he still remembers what he saw. Kyle dropped the photo. His flashlight flickered. Then the house screamed. Not a person. The house. The walls vibrated. The fireplace roared. The door slammed shut, and the ceiling began bleeding. Yes, bleeding. Thick black liquid oozed from the beams, dripping in long, slow strands like tar. It smelled like rot and burn hair. Kyle turned to run, but the floor cracked open. He fell straight through. He landed hard, with splinters digging into his back. He groaned, opening his eyes, and found himself somewhere else. A long hallway. No doors, just mirrors lining both walls. Every mirror showed a different scene. One showed him, sitting in the cruiser, age 50, eyes sunken. Another showed him as a child, running from something in the woods. Another showed the cabin, burning. But in that mirror, someone was standing inside the fire, watching him, holding an axe. Its blade reflected light. That didn't exist. He backed away, heart slamming, and the figure in the mirror turned, like it saw him, then stepped out of glass. The hallway shattered in a scream of glass and wind. Kyle fell again, this time into a chair, strapped down, hands tied. A child stood in front of him, the same boy's voice from the 911 calls. But now he was crying. Why didn't anyone come? He whispered. Kyle tried to speak, but his mouth wouldn't open. The boy walked closer. He kills us every night, over and over. And when we scream, you hear us, but no one ever helps. Behind the boy, the Axeman appeared. Massive, faceless, eyes like burning coal. He raised a weapon. Kyle screamed and woke up back in the cruiser. Engine cold, radio buzzing. The time, 5:13 a.m., exactly where he'd started, except this time, the rotary phone was in his lap, and written across the dial in what looked like blood. One more night. Kyle Benton didn't sleep after the third night. He sat at the station, still in his uniform, the rotary phone from the forest beside him on the desk like a cursed trophy. He stared at it until sunrise, his blood running colder with each passing minute. The phone didn't ring that day. Not once. It didn't need to, because deep inside he already knew the final night was coming. He went home, showered, changed into a fresh uniform. He left his badge on the kitchen table. Just a badge. He wasn't coming back as a cop. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the shadows crept longer, he returned to Mason Forest. No radio this time. No flashlight. Just a body cam, already recording, and the rotary phone tucked into his duffel. The forest was waiting for him. The trees, denser than ever, bowed slightly inward as if creating a tunnel that led only one way. The deeper he walked, the more the forest changed. It didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a memory, a decayed, looping thought. The same trees, the same stones, the same fog rolling like a breath exhaled from the past. By the time he reached the clearing, the cabin was already alive, lights glowing, smoke curling from the chimney. And this time, the front door was open, like it had been expecting him. Kyle didn't hesitate. He stepped inside. No creaks this time. No tricks. It was almost peaceful, until the door shut behind him, locking with a sound like bones snapping. Inside, the cabin looked different, older, but lived in. There were fresh dishes on the table, a fire warming the room, a photo hanging on the wall of Kyle as a child, sitting beside a woman he didn't remember. He moved closer to the frame, his breath catching. The woman wore a police uniform. Her name tag said Benton. His mother, he had no memory of her ever being a cop. She died in a fire when he was 3. The cabin fire. That cabin fire. His mind reeled. The photo flickered, shifting. Now the woman's face was charred, melted, her eyes hollow and burning. She opened her mouth and screamed without sound. Kyle stumbled back. The walls began to bleed again. The house moaned. And then came the knocking. Not from the door, from beneath the floorboards. Thump, thump, thump. The floor pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Then a hatch appeared where the rug had been. It hadn't been there before. Something wanted him to open it. And this time, he did. He pulled the hatch open. Darkness below. He climbed down the creaking wooden ladder, step by step, until his boots touched dirt. He was in a basement. A single light bulb swung above, flickering, casting long shadows. Chains hung from the ceiling. An old police radio lay in the corner, sparking. The smell was unbearable, rot and burnt wood and something deeper, older, like grief made physical. In the center of the room stood a boy, the same boy from the visions, the 911 calls. But now he looked solid, real. He turned to Kyle. "You made it," he said softly. Kyle stepped closer, whispering, "Who are you?" The boy's eyes shimmered, full of pain. "I'm what's left." He pointed behind him, and in the darkness, figures emerged, men and women in police uniforms, some with bullet wounds, others burnt, some just hollow. They stood silently. Kyle recognized every face, every one of them from the memorial wall, officers who had vanished in Mason Forest. All of them here, trapped. "We called for help," the boy whispered. No one ever came. Tears welled in Kyle's eyes. The air thickened. The shadows deepened. And then the door behind him slammed shut. A deep, dragging breath filled the basement. From the darkness, it came him, the Axeman, 7 feet tall, face covered in soot and scars, eyes black as oil. His weapon glinted in the swinging bulb's light. He spoke, but not with words. His presence was pain. His voice was instinctive terror. Kyle backed up. The boy reached for him. "You can break the loop," he said, "but only if you choose." "Choose what?" Kyle asked, panicked. The Axeman lifted his weapon. "To stay," the boy whispered. The blade came down. Pain exploded through Kyle's chest. He didn't scream. Couldn't. Everything spun, then went black. But he didn't die. Instead, he awoke, back in the cabin. Same chair, same fire, same ticking clock. But this time, no whispers. No boy, just silence. He stood slowly. The house was empty. He walked to the front door and opened it. Morning sunlight poured in. Real sunlight. The forest looked normal. Alive. He stepped outside. The cabin was behind him, but different. Crumbling. Rotten. Ash-covered. A ruin again. Smoke curled from the ruins, but not from a chimney. Just a dying memory. His cruiser sat in the clearing, covered in dew. The radio crackled. "Unit 2 to 4, do you copy?" Kyle picked it up. His hand trembled. This is Benton," he said slowly. A pause. Then Marcy's voice. "Oh my God. Kyle, you've been missing for 4 days." He dropped the radio. Looked back at the cabin. It was gone. He never went back to Mason Forest. Never put the badge on again. But every year on July 12th, at exactly 2:13 a.m., his old landline rings. No caller ID. Just one voice. The boys. Whispering. "Thank you." Kyle listens, then hangs up because that's the night the massacre replays for someone else. But thanks to him, the boy doesn't have to scream alone anymore. And the dead, they rest. For now. Story 3. He hadn't set foot in Redwood National Forest in 20 years. Not since 2005. Not since the operation. No one ever talked about it again. Detective Frank Halpern had buried that night deep beneath layers of bourbon, regret, and the illusion of retirement. But memories like those don't stay buried. Not when the forest calls them back. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. No return address. Just his name, typed, not handwritten. Inside, a photograph. A redwood tree. Gigantic, gnarled, ancient. At its base was a symbol, scratched deep into the bark. A perfect spiral, split in the middle like an eye, bleeding black sap. On the back, in shaky pen, "You were part of the silence. Now it's waking up." Frank didn't sleep that night. By morning, the photograph had curled inward on his kitchen counter, as if trying to fold in on itself and disappear. But he couldn't throw it away. Couldn't stop staring at that symbol, because he'd seen it before. In the dark, in the fire. In 2005, they called it Operation Redwood Silence, but no one ever called it anything out loud. Frank had been one of the 6 officers flown in, names erased, badges left behind. They weren't told who they were working for, just that the mission involved a compound deep in the forest. No roads, no maps, no history. He remembered hiking for hours. The trees growing unnaturally tall, the air thick like syrup. No animals, no wind, just silence. When they reached the site, it wasn't a compound. It was a circle, a perfect one. Trees cleared with surgical precision. At the center, a massive stone slab covered in moss and old carvings. Around it, black candles burned with blue flames. Frank didn't ask questions. He just followed orders. Until the gunfire started. Until people in robes appeared from the trees. Until one of his team screamed, not from a wound, but from something he saw, something none of them could explain. Then came the light, a column of it from the sky, impossibly bright and silent. Then, nothing. They woke up hours later. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, no voices on the radio. Just one whispered command from the static. leave, and forget. And they did. Until now, Frank stuffed the photo in a folder and made a decision. He had to go back. Not out of duty. Out of guilt. He'd spent 2 decades convincing himself that he didn't see what he saw. That they'd raided a drug den or a cult hideout. That the spiral symbol didn't appear in his dreams every time he drank too much. But now it was showing up on trees, in public parks, in alleys behind gas stations. And people had started going missing again. Hikers, campers, kids, always near Redwood, always vanishing without a trace. He reached out to the only other name he could remember from the op, Miles Denton, former SWAT. They hadn't spoken since that night. Frank called 3 times before Miles answered. There was silence on the line, then just 2 words. It's starting. They met the next day in a diner off Highway 101. Miles had aged hard, wrinkled face, shaking hands, eyes like cracked glass. Frank slid the photo across the table. Miles didn't touch it. They're carving it now, he muttered. Everywhere. They're not hiding anymore. Frank leaned in. What the hell did we stop in 2005? Miles shook his head. We didn't stop anything. We just delayed it. He pulled out a napkin and began drawing, the same spiral. But this time, he added lines branching from it, roots or veins. Then he circled one part. This is where it bleeds through. Frank frowned. Bleeds. Miles nodded. Places with a forest isn't just trees. Where it's thin, like skin stretched too tight. He folded the napkin, slid it toward Frank. Don't go back, he whispered. They remember you. You spoke the word. Frank froze. He hadn't thought about that moment in years. The stone, the fire, the whisper in his ear. He had repeated it without knowing why. One syllable, one ancient sound. Then everything went dark. Frank left the diner in silence. But he already knew he was going back. Not just for answers. To end it, whatever it was. 2 nights later, Frank stood at the edge of Redwood National Forest. No map, just instinct, and a scar on his wrist he didn't remember getting until that day. The spiral, faint, under the skin like a birthmark waking up. He stepped into the trees. The forest swallowed him whole. No birds, no wind, just the creaking groan of ancient wood and the distant sound of whispering leaves. Only they weren't whispering in English. They were speaking in spirals. He didn't remember the forest being this quiet. It wasn't just the absence of animals or the wind. The silence had weight, like a thick fog pressing down on his ears. Frank moved slowly, one boot crunching over pine needles at a time, each step echoing too loud against the nothingness. Somewhere between the trees, he thought he heard a voice. Faint, familiar. He turned, gun drawn, not out of habit, but fear. Fear he wouldn't see a person, or worse, that he would. But there was nothing, just the trees. Towering redwoods stretching toward a sky the color of dull lead. He continued forward, deeper into a part of the forest that didn't appear on any map. Not even the satellite ones he'd pulled up the night before. No trails, no signs. Just a void between coordinates. Eventually, the trees opened into a small clearing. He knew it immediately. 20 years ago, it had been the site of their mission, the compound. But the altar was gone. No candles, no stone, just a perfect dead circle of earth, except for the spiral. It was burned into the dirt nearly 20 feet across. Smoldering black lines carved with eerie precision, as if scorched by something that didn't care about time or temperature. Frank knelt down, brushed his hand across the edge of the symbol. It was warm, still fresh. Then the whisper came again, this time closer, not through the air, through the trees themselves. The bark seemed to hum. The branches trembled though no wind moved them. The whisper was like breath crawling through the wood, sliding down his spine. You spoke it. He froze. That voice, it wasn't from outside. It was inside his skull. Something in the forest had remembered him. He moved fast now, adrenaline replacing caution. The deeper he went, the more unnatural things became. The trees began to warp, twisting at strange angles, roots spiraling above the ground, leaves blackened like ash. Moss pulsed faintly underfoot, glowing in veins along the path. The deeper Frank walked, the less it felt like a forest and more like a living thing. He reached a fallen log and stopped. Symbols, not spirals this time. Words, dozens of them, etched violently into the wood. Names, dates, coordinates. He didn't recognize most of them, but one made his breath catch. Miles Denton, 2005 to 2025. The year ended in this year. Present tense. Frank spun around. Miles! He shouted into the trees. You came here, didn't you? No answer. But from far behind, back toward the clearing, he heard something else. A crack, then a voice. Not a whisper, a scream. He ran. He found Miles kneeling in the center of the spiral. His hands were pressed against his ears, blood seeping between his fingers. His eyes were open, unblinking, staring straight up at the sky. His lips moved, but the sound was wrong. Off. Not words, but a garbled rhythm like static wrapped in a chant. Frank approached slowly. Miles! Miles turned. His eyes were all wrong, black, with faint spirals swimming inside them. He opened his mouth, and the voice that came out wasn't his. The spiral each time. You brought it back. Frank drew his pistol, backing away. What the hell is this? But Miles lunged, not to attack, but to grab Frank's arm. When he touched him, something passed between them. A memory, but not Frank's. It was 2005 again. The moment of the light, the chanting, the fire. But this time, he saw what came through the light. Not a creature, not a god. A door, a hole in the forest that opened into something hungry. And when Frank had spoken a word, he'd opened it. He'd let it in. The spiral wasn't just a symbol. It was a lock and a key, and now it was open again. Miles released him, stumbling backward into the blackened spiral. He didn't scream this time. He just vanished, as if swallowed by the air itself. The earth shook. The trees moaned. Frank turned and ran. He made it to a small ranger station long since abandoned. Boards nailed across the windows, graffiti on the walls, everything covered in vines. But it was shelter. He slammed the door shut and shoved a desk in front of it, breathing hard, sweat pouring down his neck. In the silence, something ticked. A radio, old, crusted with dust, but still faintly alive. He leaned in. It hissed, then clicked. Then a voice, barely audible. Detective Halpern, you are requested at the altar. You will speak the word again, or we will come for you. He yanked the cord from the wall. The radio kept playing. He smashed it with the butt of his gun. It still whispered. Frank bolted outside. The spiral had reached him. Even here, there was no hiding, only finishing what he started. He made it back to the clearing by dusk. The spiral burned brighter now, pulsing red at the edges like an open wound. And at the center, something was rising. The altar. The stone slab they'd seen in 2005, now floating inches above the earth, surrounded by faintly glowing runes. It vibrated with energy, humming low and deep like a song meant for bones, not ears. Frank approached slowly. He didn't feel fear anymore. He felt inevitability. This was always going to happen. He saw them then, shadows in the trees, figures watching. Not people, not ghosts, echoes, images of the officers from 2005, each one standing where they died, their faces blurred, their mouths open in silent scream. Frank stepped into the spiral. The hum grew louder. He raised his hand and placed it on the stone. Immediately, his vision blurred. He was back there again. The night of the operation, the chanting, the door. But now he saw what was behind it. A shape, towering, endless, spiraled. Not a creature, but a memory of one. An idea that survived by imprinting itself in force, in symbols, in people. And it had waited for someone to speak the word again, to finish the ritual. Frank opened his mouth and said, the word slipped from his mouth, like it had been waiting there all along. It didn't sound like English. It didn't sound like any human language. It slithered through the air like smoke, wrapping around the trees, curling into the soil beneath the altar. The spiral pulsed once, violently, and the clearing trembled with the weight of something vast and ancient drawing breath. Then, silence. Utter, crushing, unnatural silence. Frank stood motionless. The stone altar lowered itself slowly, gently, resting back on the ground like a coffin sliding into its grave. The glowing runes faded. The spiral dimmed to a dull, lifeless black. And all around him, the shadows of his past, the echoing officers, vanished one by one into the trees. He was alone again. But something had changed. He could feel it, in the pit of his stomach, behind his eyes, like something inside him had shifted. He stumbled backward, gasping, grabbing the nearest tree for support. The bark was warm, too warm. It pulsed faintly beneath his hand, like a heartbeat. The forest had accepted him. Or worse, absorbed him. He turned and staggered away from the clearing, but the forest no longer looked familiar. The trees stretched impossibly tall, their tops lost in swirling clouds. Roots knotted together like limbs. The moon above was wrong, too close, too red. He wasn't in the redwood forest anymore. Not entirely. He was somewhere in between. Somewhere the spiral had opened. Miles was waiting for him. He stood in the center of a new clearing, this one filled with hanging bones. Animal, human, unrecognizable. They clinked together like wind chimes, though no wind blew. He was no longer bleeding, no longer shaking. His eyes were still dark, but the spirals had stopped spinning. "You finished it," Miles said quietly. Frank didn't answer. He couldn't find the words. Miles stepped forward. It wasn't a raid. It was a binding. That thing it had been summoned long before we ever arrived. The cult didn't open the door. We did. And then we ran. We sealed it, but we left it alive. Frank whispered, "Why now?" "Because the spiral needs time to loop. It feeds on the rhythm. 20 years of silence. Then it opens again. You completed the cycle." Frank looked around. "Then this is what? Hell?" Miles shook his head. "Not hell. Worse. This is memory. A place built from the ritual itself. It remembers every moment of pain, of terror, of sacrifice. It keeps us here, replaying, until someone breaks the loop." Frank stared at him. "Then tell me how." Miles smiled sadly. "You already did. The word you spoke, it wasn't just a key. It was a map." He pointed to the trees behind Frank. They were lined in symbols again, but this time not in blood, in fire. Each marking glowed softly, leading a path through the darkness. Frank didn't hesitate. He followed them. The further he walked, the more familiar things became. His old precinct, a parked cruiser, a hallway from his childhood home. Each one distorted, stitched together with branches and fog, but still recognizable. He passed through them like rooms in a dream, each memory sharper than the last. At the end, he saw her, Kara, his daughter. She was sitting beneath a tree, no older than 10, legs crossed, cradling the old radio she used to play with when he was away on night shift. She looked up. "Daddy," His knees gave out. He dropped beside her, tears welling in his eyes. Kara, you can't be here. She touched his face. You brought me? No, he choked. You died. The accident, you drowned. I wasn't there. I wasn't there to save you. She smiled gently. Maybe you weren't supposed to. Maybe this was always the way. Frank sobbed into her arms. Her presence was warm, real, solid. But the moment he blinked, she was gone, and in her place stood the altar. Again. But this time, it wasn't made of stone. It was made of memory. Photographs, reports, badges, guns, radios, all of it fused together in a towering monument of everything Frank had ever known as a cop. And at the center, a spiral, carved into the very foundation of his life. It always been there. He'd just never seen it. Until now, Frank stepped forward. His shadow stretched out behind him, long and thin, bending across the forest floor like a spider's leg. He touched the spiral one last time and said the word again. This time, it didn't hurt. It healed. The altar broke apart, the objects turning to ash. The ground trembled and then exhaled. The trees shifted back to their natural shape. The sky returned to its proper shade. The spiral had closed, and Frank was alone. He awoke 3 miles from a forest edge, covered in dirt, shaking, but alive. The ranger who found him said he'd been missing for 3 weeks. No trace of Miles, no footprints, no burn spirals. Just Frank, alone. He never spoke about what happened, not in detail, not to anyone. But sometimes, late at night, he'd tune an old radio to static and listen just to make sure he was still here, still real. And when the whispers came again, curling through the white noise like tendrils of smoke, he didn't panic. He just smiled, because he knew now the spiral never ends. It only loops, and someone, somewhere, is always next. If you made it this far into the darkness, you're one of the few who survived the spiral. If this tale left a chill crawling down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. DarXnights, where nightmares never sleep and the forest always remembers. Turn on the bell so you never miss what's lurking just beyond the trees. Until next time, sleep tight.